Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer focused in on life sciences. And as we kicked off here, I just want to include a word from our sponsor.
Episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by D3 Digital Media Marketing. Dive into the digital world with confidence and creativity on your side. D3 Digital Media Marketing is your all-in-one solution for making a lasting impact online. From the vibrant, engaging world of social media marketing, podcasts, and webinars, to the strategic depths of website development, SEO, pay-per-click, email, and content marketing, we tailor our approach to fit your unique brand story. Let's elevate your presence, connect with your audience, and drive success together. Your digital journey starts here. Visit D3 Digital Media.
And so with that, in this episode, we're going to sit down with Aron Knickerbocker, President and CEO of Aulos Biosciences. Aron's going to share his extensive experience in life sciences and highlight his pivotal roles at RayzeBio and Prime Therapeutics. And then we're also going to talk more specifically about Aulos and the good work that they're doing. So with that, welcome, Aron.
Thank you, Don. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Would you mind just taking a little bit of time to explain to everybody a little bit about yourself and what led you more specifically to Allulose and what you're doing currently in radiopharmaceuticals?
Yeah, so I'm at Aulos Bioscience, as you noted. This is a privately held company in the San Francisco Bay Area in Larkspur, California. I'm very excited about what we're doing here. We're actually using the immune system rather than radiotherapy, but the immune system to go after tumor cells and kill them. And I've really devoted most of my career in biotech to the cancer space. It's an area that's kind of a personal and professional mission area for me, having lost my mother to cancer when she was quite young at 58, and of course, knowing many other people who've been affected by the disease, friends and family. And there's still so much that needs to be done in this space. So I've really been focused on cancer for over 2 decades. And in terms of how I got here, actually began my career in research. I was a molecular biologist originally and did drug discovery research and enjoyed that. But I also wanted to learn more about the business of life sciences. And so I decided to go back to graduate school, not in science, but in business. And that put me on a different path that opened up other opportunities. So after that, I did sales, I did market research, I did brand management, marketing, business development, operations, and now CEO. This is actually my third CEO role, having been prior CEO of RayzeBio and Prime Therapeutics, as you noted. But I will say I'm as excited about Aulos as I was about any of those other companies. I think we've got very interesting things going on here and look forward to chatting more with you about them.
That sounds great. And I mean, in terms of your overall history, though, I'm surprised, always with the twists and turns that all of us make with regards to our careers. And what always is interesting to me is whenever people find their way from the bench, back to the business side, or even from seeing patients, back to business.
Right.
I'm just curious, do you miss any parts of the work at the bench, or do you feel like that really helps to feed the current work that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm very happy to have the background that I have. I think it positions me well to operate in a leadership role in a company the way that I have. But I love being around science and around clinical medicine. I'm certainly not the expert anymore, but that's where it all begins. That's where the value gets created, is in the lab and then in the clinic. And ultimately that hopefully results in commercial benefit and shareholder value creation. But it all comes down to whether there's something scientifically meaningful and clinically meaningful. So I don't think I ever want to depart too far from that. I'm not in the lab myself, but I appreciate what happens in the lab. I have a lot of respect for scientists. It's a very difficult job sometimes because things don't always work as planned and take a long time, but that makes the breakthroughs all the more sweeter. And I think we're actually developing a breakthrough at Aulos, as we'll talk about. So anyway, I think my background actually helps me interact with my peers and colleagues in a way that has maybe more depth and breadth than had I just focused on one area throughout the entirety of my career.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's more important the higher up that you get into an organization to be able to ask the right questions as well. And so, I would imagine having a background at the bench, would feed the questions and the power of the questions that you could ask along the way.
I think so. I think there's a lot of discipline in the scientific method, and that's not necessarily just applying it to science, but that same practice of having a hypothesis and a way to test that hypothesis, and then to get the results of that test and to analyze those results and draw a conclusion and maybe think about a next step or a change in direction or some decision that carries over outside the lab to business decisions, to clinical decisions, to strategy, to financing. So I think it is a good way to be rooted in terms of decision making, asking very good questions, hopefully, and that then drives informed decision making and the path forward.
So just to kind of circle back in terms of Ray's Bioscience and
Yeah.
Prime Therapeutics, did you feel like any of the lessons that you learned carried forward in terms of the things that you're doing right now, or what were some of the pivotal moments that you had, in those organizations that you feel help you now?
Yeah, and I'll even go one step further back than that to Genentech. But I feel very fortunate to have had the experiences that I had along the way. I think they've definitely shaped me. Um, I've always been willing to take risks professionally if I thought they were calculated and reasonable risks. And I've always had a kind of owner's mentality whenever I've gone anywhere, and I think have a long-term orientation. So the way I selected companies that I wanted to join or to create was on that basis, to first ask, is there a scientific and clinical basis for the company doing something different and important and hopefully changing outcomes, particularly in cancer and extending survival. I didn't want to go to a company that wasn't doing something like that or didn't have the potential to do something like that. And did I want to be an owner of that company, even if it's just a very tiny fraction of the ownership? Do I want to be a partial owner of that company because I believe in the team and the technology, and I think there's a chance to make a difference and create value? And that's been a helpful set of guideposts for me. A friend was joking with me the other day, is like, you got the Midas touch. And I said, I don't have the Midas touch. I just follow the data. And, I think that in part reflects some of the early experiences I had in the course of my career. Having been, as I mentioned, I was at Genentech in the early to mid 2000s, 2001 to 2009, or late 2000s, I guess. And so I got to see a stellar executive team in action under Art Levinson, Sue Hellman, Richard Scheller. And I think that imparted and impressed upon me the importance of following the data, following the science, making decisions on that basis first and foremost. And then is there a business rationale as well? But if you do that and you ask the right questions, as you're pointing out, and make good decisions as a result, which I think they often did, and I've tried to do as well throughout the course of my career, more often than not, you're likely to have some successes along the way. Not everything goes well, but I think employing those principles is really helpful. So I made a decision to take a big risk in 2009 and leave Genentech in the midst of a financial, market downturn, uh, and go to a very small company at the time, Prime Therapeutics, which was already founded. I'm not the founder of it, and had a very interesting protein therapeutics discovery platform. It was the same approach there. I was asking, did it have science and technology that I believed in? Was there a team internally and the investors around it that I believed in? And did I think they could make a big difference? And I thought the answer was yes. And so I actually cold called Prime. I just emailed the chairman and CEO because I knew their head of business development had left, and I referenced that she had gone, and if there was a possibility of discussing that position, I would be very interested. And that led from one thing to another. And I took the job at Prime initially as head of business development. And there I was responsible for deal making to bring cash into the company, either licensing the platform for discovery applications to our big pharma partners or licensing out molecules that we discovered that were clinical candidates or in the clinic. And that really helped finance the company. And over the years, I was promoted to chief business officer, chief operating officer and joined the board, and then ultimately CEO. But one of the risks that I took while I was there was to bring in-license a product, an antibody from a small company in the Bay Area called Galaxy. And this is what ultimately became bemarituzumab, which is an antibody to FGF receptor 2B. Actually, one of our scientists had seen something about it at a conference and sent that around to the executive team. And I said, let's try to get it. Let's make an effort. And we did. We actually beat out some big pharma bidders who were pursuing that product. And I think it reflected the fact that Galaxy could tell we were very committed to making this a high priority program. So that was something I in-licensed. And as it progressed through the clinic, I was also taking on more and more responsibility. So by the time I was CEO, it was in a phase 3 study in gastric cancer. And I knew from our phase 1 data that it was working. That was clear to me. And I think that's the benefit of experience and the wisdom that it emerges once you've been in an area for a while. So this was 2018, 2019. I prioritized that program. I made some cuts actually to other things, which was painful, of course, but I knew that we had to really concentrate our resources around that product. And I'm glad I did that. I got certainly input along the way that I shouldn't be spending as much on it or that we should stop it for various reasons. And I'm glad that I didn't, because that's actually what read out very positively and caused Amgen to buy 5 Prime in 2021 for about $2 billion. So, that's an example of taking risks, but getting return for shareholders, but also patients who will benefit from that drug, which is very active against cancers that overexpress this FGF receptor on their surfaces. So that's an example of, taking a calculated risk, going to a small company, building that small company with a very good team there. And then when I left, I wanted to do entrepreneurial stuff again, but start from scratch. So when I left in 2019, I got together with 2 other co-founders, one of whom had worked with me at 5 Prime. And she had this idea of scientifically doing something different in radiopharmaceuticals, which was to couple peptidomimetics as the targeting part of a radiopharmaceutical to actinium-225 as the sort of warhead or the radioisotope that would locally irradiate the tumor. Her name's Deb Cherish. So she, Aaron Kantoff, and I put together what became RayzeBio. And I was the CEO and chairman of that. And our whole idea was to do something, again, different, take risks, with the idea that we could make a big change in cancer if it worked, because we're going to target the isotope in a way that was very specific and we thought had kind of the Goldilocks PK of not staying in circulation for too long or too little, but enough time to get to the tumor cells and kill them, and to use a different isotope than had ever been used at much scale, which was actinium-225, an alpha particle emitter. So these alpha particles are like little cannonballs that come shooting out of the atom, and one of those can kill a tumor cell if it hits the DNA and induces double-stranded DNA breaks. So we were way ahead of the curve on that, and the company went through 4 rounds of private financing and then went public last year in 2023. And in February this year was acquired by Bristol Myers Squibb for about $4 billion. So an incredible outcome. This is a company I put together during the pandemic, actually incorporated it in my home office. And all the pitching that we had done to raise the initial financing was like this. It was over video conferences, didn't meet anybody in person because we were all locked down in the pandemic. But a real success. And, I think, again, a testament to taking calculated risks, working with great people and having great technology that results in significant value. And I hope these medications coming forth from RayzeBio via Bristol Myers Squibb now really save a lot of lives and extend a lot of lives.
Excellent. So would you tell us a little bit more about Aulos and what it is that you're working on there? Tell us more about the kind of the mission and the focus of the company.
Yeah, so as I referenced at the outset, we're engaging the immune system to kill tumor cells. And that's really our mission, is to extend and improve the lives of patients with cancer using innovative, safe, and effective cancer immunotherapy. So that's a lot to do, right? You want to make it safer, you want it to be effective, and to help a lot of people. And the way we're going about this is using what's a well-known cytokine in a way that's, we think, better for the patient. And that is, we're redirecting something called interleukin-2 or IL-2. And IL-2 is something that's been known of for decades. It's been approved since the early 1990s as a recombinant human protein, and it's approved for melanoma and renal cell carcinoma. But it doesn't get a lot of use these days because it's very toxic. And that's because IL-2 can bind to different cell types. So it can bind to immune effector cells. Those are the cells we want it to bind to. These are things like CD8 T effector cells and natural killer cells. Those can kill tumors. So we want IL-2 binding there. However, it can also bind to other immune cells called T regulatory cells. And their job is just the opposite. They suppress the immune response. So we don't want the IL-2 expanding the Treg population and activating them. And the other areas where the IL-2 receptor gets expressed are on the lining of blood vessels, the vascular endothelium, and the smooth muscle around those blood vessels. And so one of the on-target effects of high-dose IL-2 is it causes vascular leak syndrome. And that is the fluid that's in the blood comes out of the blood system, out of the vasculature, into the surrounding tissues. It can cause swelling. This is especially dangerous in the lungs, pulmonary edema. The blood pressure drops, the heart rate goes up, and that's an on-target effect because high doses of IL-2 will cause the vasculature to become more leaky or more relaxed and allow fluid to get out. So what we're trying to do, and I think what it looks like we're achieving now in the clinic, is redirecting IL-2 so that it goes towards those good guys, the effector cells that can go after the tumor cells and eradicate them. So again, CD8 T effectors and NK cells. But we steer it away from the immunosuppressive Tregs or T regulatory cells and away from the vasculature so we don't get the vascular leak and pulmonary edema. That was the theory, and preclinically it looked like that's what our product, which is a monoclonal antibody, could achieve. And I think we're now seeing in the clinic that indeed we are achieving that. And this is by, again, a monoclonal antibody that's called AU007. Sometimes we just call it 007 for shorthand, like James Bond. But 007 binds to IL-2 and redirects it. So it binds on the part of IL-2 that would interact with one of the receptor subunits, and it prevents the IL-2 from binding to any receptor that expresses that particular subunit. That subunit is on the Treg cells and on the vasculature. So we are seeing something that looks active already. We've seen that in phase 1 and early phase 2. In fact, we'll be presenting at ASCO on this in early June in Chicago. Looks to be quite safe and well tolerated. We didn't have any patients in dose escalation coming off for drug-related adverse events. And we're seeing the kind of pharmacodynamic effects changing the immune cell context in the way that we want, which is to expand the effectors and decrease the suppressors.
Very good. And then I also heard that you have breaking news for today to share as well.
Yes, hot off the presses. So we just announced this morning a new arrangement with Merck KGaA. So this is Merck in Darmstadt, Germany. And one of the products that they sell is Bavencio, and the non-proprietary name is avelumab. This is a PD-L1 antibody. And we really like Bavencio because it's unique in the entire class. So there are lots of PD-L1 and PD-1 antibodies that are approved or in development. It's the only approved agent that has not only checkpoint blocking activity by preventing PD-L1 from binding to PD-1, so the tumor cells overexpress PD-L1 as a way to shut down the T cell response. The T cells express PD-1 to which the PD-L1 binds. So it interrupts that interaction between those two proteins. But the other thing that's unique is Bavencio has what's called effector function. So the tail of that particular antibody will bind to natural killer cells, or natural killer cells will bind to it and engulf the cell that overexpresses that target and kill it. So we like that because one of the things that 007 does is increase the NK cell count. So we've tested this preclinically. We've seen synergy in those preclinical models, including complete eradication of established tumors when we combine something that looks like avelumab or anti-PD-L1 with effector function. So we use a surrogate of that with 007. And the data are quite remarkable. So we're eager to get this into the clinic and start testing it in patients with cancer and defining its activity. That should start in the second half of the year.
Excellent to hear, and
Yeah,
congratulations. I mean, this is obviously big news, overall for the whole organization. Um,
it is.
just
Yeah, and I should just clarify, it's a clinical trial collaboration and supply agreement. So essentially, we're receiving free drug from Merck KGaA, and then of course we're both interested in seeing what the results are. But that's the nature of the relationship. It's a trial collaboration and supply relationship.
excellent. So can you talk a little bit more about the some of the challenges and or opportunities that you foresee, in the field, as you go to bring drugs to market as well.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about that as it relates to what I've done over my career, and I think one of the keys is really targeting. So we talked earlier about RayzeBio. That was about targeting a radioisotope right to the tumor microenvironment. In our case, we're targeting IL-2 to the effector cells that can go after a tumor, and not targeting it to places where it would reduce efficacy or increase toxicity. So I think targeting is really key, and that can be achieved in all sorts of ways. But generally, that results in better safety for the patient, hopefully a wider therapeutic index for the drug, and that's what we're trying to do. So the challenges are nothing new in terms of, the sort of things I have to work on a day-to-day basis. I've been around enough and done a lot of this before to know that we've got to raise funding to generate data that creates value for shareholders and for the patients who receive the product. And then that in turn hopefully raises more funding, and we can get to later stages of development, hopefully commercialization someday. So, that part I've done a lot of deal making on the business development side as well. But those are the things that we're trying to do, and we want to be as efficient and as thoughtful about it as we can. I think it's been remarkable what we've been able to achieve with a small team and funding, but not, enormous funding. We've just been very capital efficient, and we've been able to put that to good use and deploy it to generating what I think are some very interesting results already, and hopefully much more to come.
Yeah, very good. In terms of, your past history of all of the leadership lessons that you would have learned along the way, which ones actually are influencing your approach currently at Aulos?
Yeah, one thing somebody told me was, as I was coming into the CEO role at Five Prime, actually, so years ago, was be authentic. Don't try to be somebody you're not, because eventually, people, maybe even quickly, people will see that you are putting up some facade. So I try to be authentic. I show up and sort of do what I say and say what I do, and try not to surprise people with any different version of me. So being authentic, and I look for that in the people I hire as well. I think that's a really important aspect of assembling a strong team, and we have a great team at Aulos. But in terms of leadership, I also try to listen carefully and to recognize that I'm not the expert on all subject matters, and I have people around the table or people with whom we can interact who are sometimes better subject matter experts than I would be or others would be on a given topic. So really listen to them and integrate that information with what I'm hearing from other team members or other constituents. And then sort of amalgamating that information, processing and integrating, and making decisions. And I think this is one of the key things that executives have to do well, which is to make decisions. And sometimes the decision is, wait, we need more data, or stop, or it's, go as fast as you possibly can because this is amazing new data. But make a decision, because we don't create any value when we don't make any decisions. We just fritter it away. So that's something I do. And sometimes that means going slow to go fast, taking the time to get those key questions answered as definitively as you can, and then going quickly thereafter because you've got the information in hand. That's generally how I like to approach things. I spend a lot of time thinking about recruiting and team building, and I've had the privilege to work with some excellent teams over the years, this being one of them at Aulos. We have outstanding people. Even though it's a small team, it's a very experienced group, people who've been around cancer immunotherapies, immune engagers, artificial intelligence that was used to create our antibody, have built companies, have had exits, have faced trials and tribulations and lived through them. Because one of the things I also look for is resilience in people. So I've been blessed to be able to handpick this team in large part at Aulos, and I've done it in a way where I look for people who bring those things together. They don't have to think like me or think like everybody else. That's not what I want. But people who are motivated, pragmatic, and can see the bigger shared vision and work toward that. And that's who I'm lucky to work with every day.
Excellent. What inspires you?
Oh man. Well, people always say patience, and that is what inspires me. But sometimes it's the unique stories that you get about how you're impacting a given patient. So, when you know you've made a difference that really helps that patient either live longer or feel better, or hopefully both, that's very gratifying. We have a patient in the trial now who has a form of head and neck cancer, and one of his lesions was in the vertebrae of the neck, the cervical vertebrae, or right next to it. So that lesion was impinging on motor and sensory nerves that go down his arm and into his hand, and he actually had a lot of pain and reduced hand function because of the cancer, because of the way it was growing into these nerves in his neck. And we're reducing his tumor, and that's wonderful. Of course, you want to see tumors shrinking, but he's also regaining function of his hand and has much less pain. So that's literally, a sensible a feeling of progress that patient can sense and can benefit from on a day-to-day, even minute-to-minute basis. Is now he can use his hand again, and it doesn't hurt so much, and the cancer is getting smaller, and hopefully we're extending his life. So things like that are wonderful to hear about, and he does have a durable response. So hopefully we'll keep giving him benefit and for a long time. So I love
That's
stuff like that.
excellent.
That really jazzes me up.
Yeah, for sure. Give you a lot of energy coming out of it. What
Yes.
concerns you?
Things that I can't control. So market shocks, geopolitical tensions that are escalating. I can't influence these, but we have to live with them. And sometimes they impact the way that we do business, hopefully not. So that kind of stuff is concerning. I don't worry a lot about the other stuff. I take it very seriously and I try to do it well, but I've done these things for a number of years and have seen a lot and done a lot. And like I said, I've got a great team. So we know who we are and what we're capable of. We know what we want to do, where we want to go, and we know how to get there. So now it's just about keeping it financed and executing appropriately. And I think we've done a good job of that to date.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. And what excites you?
I really want to make a big difference in cancer, and this is the way I felt for many years. I referenced the sort of personal connection to it, but what would be really exciting, I have this fantasy in my head, which is that I go to the ASCO annual meeting, the big cancer conference that happens usually every late May and June in Chicago. And I go there, I don't know if this is 2027 or 28 or whatever, but some point in the future, I'm in the plenary session in a gigantic conference room at McCormick Center, and they're discussing the AU-007 pivotal trial data. And the presenter throws up a slide, and it shows median overall survival, and it's a huge difference between the group that received 007 and the other group. And the crowd stands up and gives us a long-standing ovation. That would be amazing. And I think we could do that, and not just for one type of cancer. This could be the kind of drug that gets used in multiple tumor settings. So that would very much excite me to see that kind of outcome for patients.
Yeah, I think I've referenced this before on previous shows. So I mean, I lost my mother as well to cancer earlier on in my life, and
Yeah.
I frequently sort of reference this point and say, cancer made no bigger enemy for itself, in terms of, creating children that are essentially left behind, that are battling. And so that's what I hear is kind of the war cry for that. And so, Aron Knickerbocker, I wanted to thank you for being on the Life Science Success podcast, for all the great work that you're doing at Aulos. And I look forward to seeing your vision come true as well. So that would be great.
Thanks so much, Don. It's been good to talk with you today.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.